trying to make the best out of a bad situation, really. But, for the listeners, I'll sort of just give the brief version of what happened. But basically, we'd hodled this Bitcoin for 10 long years. It appreciated in value by something like 40,000%. We were on cloud nine, feeling pretty happy with ourselves. We'd made a good decision. We'd avoided all the scams. We'd avoided all the exchanges blowing up. On paper, everything's looking pretty sweet, right? However, our story took the most ridiculous bad turn. It's almost like a bad Netflix special, right? Because after 10 years, me and my dad decided we're going to go to El Salvador, almost like a bit of a celebration, right? 10 years, a long time. We'll go on a father-son trip of a lifetime to El Salvador. We went to the Adopting Bitcoin conference. We're having a whale of a time. And actually, me and my dad, we've been working on this Bitcoin Lightning app for sort of 4 or 5 years, right? Just kicking this idea around and playing with it, mainly in our free time. And we went to the conference, and on the last day, because we'd seen so many amazing talks with people building all their projects, we were all like fired up, motivated, right? So we get back to our Airbnb in El Salvador, and we had to fund some Lightning channels to do some testing on this thing that we'd built. And, man, I can still remember it. My dad, he just said, well, I don't want to swear all over your podcast, right? But he said one word that begins with an F. And I said, well, what's up? And he just said, look, Rick, I've been hacked. All of the Bitcoin is gone. And yeah, it was a sizable amount, 25 Bitcoin that we'd held for a long time. Yeah, it was gone. I mean, at first it was a crazy situation because we're pacing around this Airbnb, if you can picture it, thinking things like my dad had bought a new laptop like a couple of months earlier, and he'd he's a software developer, so he knows what he's doing. He's got backups everywhere, and he'd reconfigure things and move things around. At first he was like, well, hang on. Then maybe I've moved something, or, this is a different key. You're just you're in this desperate thing. You can't quite believe it. You're trying to figure out why it can't possibly be true. Just bargaining with yourself, really. And then, I asked him to send me the transaction IDs of these payments moving around. And once I put them into a block explorer, and I saw the extent of the transactions and where they'd been, it was really obvious that this wasn't us moving Bitcoin around and reconsolidating. This was something, it had been stolen. And I mean, look, I thought to myself as well before this podcast with you, Scott, as well, I should maybe open up a little bit more about just how brutal and savage that was, because I really want to drive the message home to people. If you look at my talks, I tell a lot of jokes, and I make fun of myself quite a bit and stuff like that. But in all honesty, there's an element of that is just a bit of a defense mechanism, right? It's a classic self-deprecating British sense of humor, right? But the truth is, I mean, I was absolutely in a state. It's hard to really explain when you've hodled for 10 years. You've obviously imagined what you're going to do with that money and how you're going to use it to help your friends and your family out and all this sort of stuff. And, having been I guess maybe on the spectrum of conspiracy theorist, or that's what I've been told for the last 10 years, I am genuinely concerned about the state of the world and what's going to happen as fiat money dies. And I'm actually not a flashy guy at all, right? I wasn't interested in Lambos or anything. The main reason I think one of the big reasons I hodled for so long was that I wanted to set some friends and family free. I have friends that, work hard, have kids, and they're swimming upstream like everybody else, struggling to get by despite doing all the right things. And I don't know, man, maybe I've got some weird sort of, savior complex, but actually, the reason I didn't sell at 20,000 and the reason I didn't sell at 70,000 was because this was a bigger thing. I wanted to make sure everyone around me was safe. So when we discovered the Bitcoin was stolen, it's really hard to process, because you feel like you've let everybody around you down. You feel like you've let yourself down, and you feel a bit like a fraud, actually. That's one thing I've been having to deal with is, I've been in Bitcoin a long time, and to make what were really quite silly mistakes with how we secured it, to come then back out in front of the Bitcoin community is a hard thing.